For those who don't know me, here's kind of what lists as what I am. I'm currently in integration, or no, it's Azure MVP, I believe. We've moved on. Done some TechNet Wiki offering, blogs, forums. I like Seahawk, so I'm a 12-man. So that's why you see some of my logos here as well. And a picture of me at CenturyLink like a year ago, or 2 years ago, I think. And I'm also kind of doing running. So sometimes if you see tweets with, run with me or other people, then that's kind of a thing I like to do. And I'm currently training for the New York Marathon, the 6th of November. So a lot of people are plugging some kind of stuff, giving out goodies. So this is kind of a recent book we did for BizTalk 360. So I still do BizTalk, so this is kind of what we released a couple of weeks ago, I guess. So I co-authored it with a few other people like Johan Cooper from New Zealand and Eldert from Motion 10. So you can download this. So this is kind of a plug for this book. I won't do much BizTalk today, so I'm more moving into to IoT. That's kind of my new playing field these days. So I used to do a lot of BizTalk, but I kind of moved on to a whole different area that I had to do with BizTalk, or I mean Azure and IoT. So is it a hype? Well, I would say it's more like a reality. It's like it's coming more and more vivid, even in the projects what I'm doing. And who hasn't got any of these devices that are like, depicted in this picture? I only saw one hand, so usually any one of you probably have one of the devices, either for running. I recently moved and I've got smart lighting in my home now with Philips Hue. I've got a smart thermostat in the Nest, so I've kind of a few of these things, and I think you have as well. And before I start my journey into this space and talk a little bit about how you could leverage the Azure IoT, I kind of think this is pretty appropriate in the IoT space. So we kind of want to learn from the past or the current to kind of predict the future or optimize. So that's going to be kind of vivid in my story as well. So my first experience with IoT was, and I don't know if some of you have seen my Integration Monday talk, was with wind. So the company I worked for wanted to kind of visualize their wind from their Dutch wind farms in this case, and kind of provide the near real-time data in forms of a marketing campaign. So they want to kind of show you how green they were and how many energy they could generate or harness from the wind in on and offshore wind farms, and show that to kind of the users. So if you went to that website, you clicked any of those wind farms, you could see how much it produces, how much energy is generating for households. You get some of the other data, how many, it kind of put in the fun factor too, so how many times you could drive around the earth with an electric car, or how many times you could light up the Amsterdam Marina, which is the Ajax soccer stadium. So if you look behind it in the total value chain of this kind of solution, you got your wind turbines that sends out a lot of events towards a field gateway or SCADA systems. So you'll hear more SCADA related information in the other talks. That was kind of aggregated or consolidated, because SCADA stands for Supervisory Control and Data Acquisition. So they kind of harnessed all that data and kept it, and a subset of that data was kind of exposed to us. And in that scenario, we kind of used BizTalk, so that was kind of the platform we had to use. So we kind of, with a scheduled task adapter, every 5 minutes kind of pulled, or at least talked to that API and got that data out, and put that in kind of a SQL storage on-premise. And on top of that, we had just one kind of a .cf service that as soon as you hit the website, it's one chunky call, you get all the data to visualize what you just saw. So where do you see IoT? So this is one of the areas. You see in the cities. You see it in buildings, so climate control, for instance. You even have kind of smart buildings that generate energy, or they kind of efficiently go around with their energy instead of energy consuming. They kind of generate energy, and they're kind of energy neutral. You see it in the energy world a lot. That's what I've had my first experience with. You see it in healthcare. So recently I was involved in rating as a juror for certain initiatives in the healthcare space. So there was like one solution around surgical equipment. So they kind of scanned all the surgical equipment that came in. They have certain expiry dates. And once they were used in the theater opera, they were kind of scanned as well. So they kind of logistic way of visualizing totally where do they use all that surgical equipment. And that way gives them insight in how much they need and how much they should purchase in the future. And that's kind of a cost-effective way. That's very interesting. So a lot happens in that space. And the same in mobility. So while I was driving around in the UK the last couple of days, I've driven all the way up to Newcastle, Edinburgh and back. I did see some initiatives, a lot of roadworks about smart highways or motorways. So I was kind of thinking, if they're that smart, they probably also know how fast I've driven. So I've got a kind of the feeling that happens and I go back by ferry, that I kind of, oh, before you leave, sir, we've got a kind of a ticket for you waiting, or a kind of invoice that you need to pay before you can leave. So going back to that value chain, so you just saw, you know, a custom solution with a lot of on-prem technologies, and how if you look at it with a complete Azure stack, and how would that value chain look at? So this is kind of a familiar picture you've probably seen before. So you got event producers on one end, you collect them either through the devices that are connected directly with the internet. You can have kind of cloud gateways, or you have field gates first, that kind of where your device are connected to that gateway before it, you know, heads up to, for instance, Event Hub. So you've heard that already before, a couple of days in the previous session. So that kind of could do an ingress of all that data, then subsequently is hooked in as an input towards your stream analytics or other adapters that kind of store that data later on for analysis, either in machine learning, for instance. And with the stream analytics, you can do more a real-time analysis of your data and present that. So this is kind of an end-to-end picture of your IoT value chain. So on top of that, you could also see this type of thing as a reference architecture that's being depicted here as well. So you have your devices and data sources on one end, you transport, that's connectivity, you process that data, and eventually you present that. So if you look at the ecosystem, at least that's what I'm seeing also in my current project. So on one hand, you have your IoT solution, get that data, act upon that data, further analysis that data, and do some kind of decision making. You can, on the other hand, do that also with your existing systems and leverage the cloud, doing analysis and that kind of stuff using machine learning, data lake, and upcoming technology, or Hadoop, for instance. But you could also, and that's what we do, for instance, if you don't have the infrastructure or the knowledge inside your company to set up kind of IoT solutions, you could say, or talk or work with third parties that set up that solution for you and exchange that data with your own data to make more kind of vivid decision making within your enterprise. So I'll show you an example of that in a minute, what I mean with it. So the scenario in this case is about a greenhouse where I want to optimize my crops, but also want to be energy efficient. I want to learn more of how I could generate or create, for instance, more tomatoes in my greenhouse. So in Holland, we have a lot of greenhouses in the rest of the country. And some of these farmers, for instance, also have their own type of energy supply with, for instance, wind turbines. So if I want to set up the solution, then I kind of want to leverage what I've got in the cloud. So if you see this great picture, you see that there's tons of services out there, IaaS, PaaS, and also SaaS, what you can get out of Windows Azure. So you particularly here also grouped a set of technologies around analytics and IoT. So the kind of building blocks for IoT solutions, if you leverage completely what you can find in Azure, are the IoT hub for connectivity, stream analytics, storage. You can use Power BI or app services to kind of visualize the data, and there's of course many more types of services you could use. So you've heard Event Hub before, and that's kind of where you can collect all that data and get a high throughput towards your stream analytics or Storm, and you can divert that, and I'll show that in my walkthrough, to either cold or hot storage. So cold could be that you want to store that data later to put that through your stream analytics or analytics solution you have to get more kind of insight in your environment. And as I said, it really works well with stream analytics. It's connected to, it supports several kind of protocols, the ones you already know, the HTTP, but also the newer ones that are being described yesterday by Clemens. It's really suited for real-time analytics. So we use it a lot in our, at least the projects I use for laboratory results that get back on crops and fields. So in the case of a greenhouse, for instance, you want to like to learn what's the environment, what's the temperature, what's the humidity, is the soil where your plants grow not too dry, or does it need a little bit more watering, or do you need to apply some more fertilization? So that type of stuff, that's all, when you measure all that data, it gets back to you, you kind of see from, okay, hey, I need to act upon that one. But I also aggregate that data for later analysis. So what we particularly use in our solutions is a lot of storage. So it's either blob storage, it's table storage, it's queues, because it's kind of it's kind of pretty cheap solution for you to collect all that data and store it for later use or direct use. It's pay as you go, so you can just scale up easily or scale down. There are kind of tons of REST APIs and tools you could use to work with storage in general. And then you got machine learning, and that's what I found pretty interesting, is where you collect all that data towards, for instance, you create a training set first, so that's based upon your insight and knowledge from the past. And then you apply all that test data. So the test data is kind of the data you ingress, and you start trying to train your model. In the greenhouse, you start training what the optimum environment should be for that greenhouse to have, the much amount of crop you could need, or for instance, what the best way would be to generate energy. Or sometimes you have energy but not enough energy, so you kind of want to know when you want to purchase energy from an energy supplier. Machine learning is new, it's free, and it's relatively also very inexpensive. And then you got Power BI, so you've heard that before. So in our projects, we kind of use it to visualize and analyze the data and show it to our business, but also towards our partners. So when we collaborate, we share kind of our insights as well, and vice versa. So let's walk through a scenario where you have this greenhouse on one end, you have some of your own windmills you generate your energy for. You get kind of that ingress of data that goes through stream analytics. Some part will go to storage for later use of analytics, and some straight will go into your Power BI. So one way of, as soon as your ingress of your data starts, you're getting all that data in, it's kind of hard to see what goes on in your event hubs. You could look either in the portal, or you, for instance, could look into the Service Bus Explorer. So it kind of depicts what you see of amount of data flowing through. I think the new tool, at least the proposition Saravana has with the Service Bus 360, is really a good way of getting more hands-on on your event hub, which is a part of that service bus. So your data kind of comes in, you can visualize and see that in your stream analytics. So that event hub is an input for your stream analytics, so you can have kind of visualize that through the portal. So the data comes in, so for instance, the wind data comes in and it collects and it serves kind of an input, and that input comes out into a storage. In this case, it's just a simple blob storage. And if you look at stream analytics, so the data just flows through, you can have multiple queries. So one query would be just, okay, straight away store that into my archive. And the other would be, hey, if it's too humid inside my greenhouse, or the outside temperature is pretty high, then I kind of need to act upon that, the environment doesn't go, or at least have too much influence on my growth within my greenhouse. So if there's alert, that alert is kind of picked out through that query you just saw, and it will end up somewhere else in the storage, and it could be kind of an input to alert me that something's going on in my greenhouse. It's too humid or too hot, and I need to act upon it to prevent that my crops will go sour. And eventually I could use that data to directly visualize what goes on within my greenhouse. So you saw that in the previous demo, or could also use that for kind of showing what goes on in the last couple of months or days within my greenhouse in terms of outside temperature, humidity, CO2, and that kind of stuff. So that's kind of the way you can visualize it. So this is a complete build-up custom solution, similar to to my wind experience, where that's completely built up from the ground up. Microsoft, though, on the other hand, does have a pre-configured solution, so for predictive maintenance, but also for remote monitoring. So you kind of can set that up within minutes, so you click and then it scales up a lot of these services you are seeing depicted in this picture. And do know that if you want to try this solution out for your own purposes, and it's just for training purposes or for demo purposes, that you kind of have to scale down, otherwise it will come with a pretty high cost, because some of these services are scaled up pretty high. But you can leverage or use these pre-configured solutions to build your own type of IoT solution. So that's another way of approaching this. So in the way I see it is either you do a complete solution from the ground up, so that's what we're currently working on in some of our IoT solutions, or you could say, hey, I'm going to leverage what's already out there, and that's that IoT solution, that pre-configured solution you could use. So you see kind of, a lot of things happening on all sides of this spectrum if you look in general to it. So I see a lot of things happening on the front end, integration way. So, our playing field has expanded, as you can see and have learned the last couple of days. You see BI coming into the picture, embedded software, so that can be in the later talk. You see cloud, and a lot of things is about speed and agility. So we see that as well. So we have a lot of initiative going on, and so have our competitors. And we try to be on the edge of this with regards to crop optimization, for instance. And the other thing I feel or think that it's not more about technology these days, but more about the data. So when we're talking to our partners, then it's a lot about, yeah, but I don't know if I really want to share your data with you, or that you want to share the data with me. But we do have, as soon as we have signed agreement and there's trust between those parties, then things really start get going. So it's not about the technology anymore, because as you can see, you can few mouse clicks, have a proper architecture in place, and you can have your solution going. So here's some of my contact details. I definitely would recommend to stay on for some of the other two IoT talks that will go further drill down. So one will be about the real world industrial IoT. So that's also where you see SCADA systems. And Mikhail will talk more about the IoT hub, so that will be more on the devices side. And I think that kind of wraps it up, so I sped it up a bit to give my next speaker a little bit more leverage in time. So thanks for listening, and